to compare it to.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this last of the little installments of Parshat MiKetz for this year. With God's help, we will continue this in a year to come, or we will change the format. But for now, it seems like the best thing to do is each week's Sedra as we can, doing the best we can. Um, so I'm going to start with the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And I want to welcome Judith to the group too. Judith, it's good to see you. Good to know you're here. So here we are. So we read that he married the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And Rashi explains who Potiphar, that's one and the same. It is Potiphar, the one who he was slave to. Venikra Potiphar, so two words. So Huti is like it's a sort of a put down of a person. And para can be like torn or like if somebody's hair is a big mess, we can talk about it sort of disarranged, what have you, but messed up. Al Shenista race, may alav. He was, he became uh, castrated as Unistares. A saris is a eunuch. So essentially he became incapable of, at a certain point, of procreation. And they had this belief, as you'll see, why? Lefi shechamad et Yosef, because he desired Joseph so much, the Mishkav Zachur, to have male intercourse with him. Remember, Joseph was a beautiful looking person, and they believed that if you engaged in male intercourse, you would become castrated, essentially. I mean, not physically, but that your ability to procreate would be destroyed.
Well, I guess they believe that even if you just desired it, because he did it. I mean, it says here he was emasculated because
Right.
he desired Joseph for homosexual relations,
Right.
but he didn't have Joseph for that.
That's
So if he
true.
was
Yeah.
still, he
Mhm.
he
Right.
just maybe for the way they looked at it back then was just the feeling.
Right. It was, and the word chamad is like, that's from, is it, which commandment is Lo Tachmod? It's the 10th commandment where you desire your neighbor's wife. It says, that's the word that's used. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm blocking on the English for the moment.
Covet.
Covet. That's what chamad means, right? He coveted Joseph. So, even the commandment, thou shalt not covet, if it's only talking about a feeling, it's hard to control feelings.
Yeah.
So Hamad must mean something beyond feelings, that it must be some kind of engagement of the person in a way that is something that is controllable. In other words,
Perhaps.
to obsess on it in some way,
But
you
I
know.
think that, I mean, I thought that in like um, observant Judaism, that you are supposed to try to control certain feelings,
Oh,
maybe including this and also anger,
right.
that, that, even the feelings themselves can be considered sinful. I mean, not by me necessarily, but by some people.
No, no, no. Okay. So what I think is very helpful, and I think there's some elements within Buddhism in terms of detachment that are part of us. So I think, look, we all have feelings, and we all have, I suspect, inappropriate feelings, and the question is, do you choose to continue thinking about them, or do you sort of try to find ways to dissociate as much as you can? And I think that's the realistic point about it. And sometimes following those feelings can actually involve physical actions, that tend to just pour gasoline on those feelings and just make them flare up even more. And that's what you're not supposed to do. And the other piece on those statements, we have a member of our congregation, Florence Metz, who's a centenarian, and she quotes, I believe it's Browning, something to, and I wish I could remember the quote exactly, Lisa, or any of you may remember the exact quote, right? If our reach didn't extend beyond our grasp, then what's a heaven for? In other words, these commandments may actually be unreachable, but the very activity of trying to grasp for them is, in fact, what keeps us out of trouble.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it's a really great point you brought up, Lauren. Thank you. Yeah. So let's make sure, where are we in the actual text
So we're
itself?
on 46,
Okay, and that's here.
Yosef ben
Yeah.
Shloshim.
Yosef ben Shloshim Shana. Joseph was 30 years old, but lifnei Pharaoh, when he stood before Pharaoh. So he came out of that dungeon. He was 30 years old, and we actually have his age when he was sold into slavery. Do you remember how old he was?
20?
17.
No,
He was
close.
17. So yeah, but 17 from so he was gone for so he hadn't seen Jacob, right? And he still isn't seeing Jacob. There are now 13 years are passing, and Jacob doesn't go down to Egypt until the years of famine begin. So there are now 7 good years that are coming up ahead. Jacob is not going to see him, and that makes 20 years. 20 years Jacob does not, that has to live with the thought that Joseph is dead. So that at this particular moment. So I think, the fact that he had 20 years with Laban, he has 20 years not seeing Joseph. I mean, this is a message to us about expectations and the expectations of of attempting to live a righteous life, not to expect that we get the reward in this world or that life is going to be, a bed of roses. Be'omdo lifnei Pharaoh melech Mitzrayim, when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Vayetze Yosef milifnei Pharaoh, and Joseph went out from before Pharaoh. Just want to make sure I've got everything down here, right? Vayavor b'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, and he passed through the entire land of Egypt. Vatas haaretz b'sheva shnei hasava likmatzim, and the earth, the land produced during those 7 years of plenty, likmatzim, it overflowed. It just overflowed the plenty and the storehouses, etc. Let's see what it says here. Vatas haaretz, and the land produced ketargumo. So let's take a look at the Targum. Uchnashu dairei ara,
Let me
and
just tell you that that the Chabad doesn't translate it as the land produced. It says, in the years of plenty, the inhabitants of the land gathered.
you're anticipating, Lauren. You're
Oh,
anticipating.
okay. No, it says that in the
Exactly what
as
that
translation of the text is why I'm saying that.
right, but that is the Targum. That is the
Okay.
Targum, right? Kanshu means gathered.
Okay.
Dairei ara, those who inhabited the land. B'shva shnei sova, during the 7 years of plenty. So ibura laotsarin, the produce into the storehouses.
Hmm.
That's and Rashi. So they are taking Rashi's advice. Chabad is taking Rashi's advice and translating it the way he says, "Ket targumo," as it is rendered in the Targum. So the
And then it also says it does not lose its meaning of
wait
making
a
or
minute,
producing. Like,
we're gonna let yeah, we're
okay, sorry.
gonna again read the Rashi. The
Okay.
Ein halashon ne'ekar, and the meaning of this sentence that is not removed, uprooted, right? Milashon asiya, from the idea of producing, of making. In other words, they're taking the produce and taking what the land produced and putting it into those storehouses, is in fact doing. Okay, asiyah is to do. La kamatzim. So he says in this word kamatzim, kometz al kometz yad. So the word kometz is based on this, on doing this, taking a handful, right? That's what the priests would do when they would take the incense. They would take it in their hands like that. Um, Kometz, okay, kometz al kometz, yad al yad, hayu otsurim. So komatzim, it's beautiful how Rashi is explaining it. He meant bit by bit. In other words, little by little, because a kometz isn't very much, but bit by bit, they gathered all this produce. Otsurim, they would store away. Vayikbotz et kol ochel, and they gathered all the food, Sheva Shanim, of the 7 years, Asher Hayu be'eretz Mitzrayim, which took place in the land of Egypt, Vayiten ochel be'arim, and they put food in the cities, ochel stei ha'ir, the food produced by the field of the city, asher tzvivotea, which surrounded it, natan betocha, they placed within it. Ochel stei ha'ir, asher, okay, so he's explaining the food of the fields of the town, asher tzvivotea, natan betocha. In other words, those fields that surrounded the city, they took the food and put within the city. Shekol eretz ve'eretz ma'amedet peroteha, because each and every land, uh, um, oh, I'm trying to think, ma'amedet peroteha means sort of sustains its fruit, or fruit. We know that, of course, vegetation depends on the area, the location, right? But I think what it's saying here, and you can check me on the Chabad translation here, Lauren, is somehow they're saying that when it says ma'amedet, what it's saying is that it can keep it, it'll keep it. It won't go, it won't spoil.
Yeah,
So
it's
I
a
think that,
preserved.
yeah, preserves, that's the
That's
point.
exactly what you're saying. So I
Right,
never
that's
jump
what
in.
it means. Right, that's
Even if you use
exactly
different words, you're saying the same
right.
thing.
Right, that's the ma'amedet, that it preserves its fruit. That's the point about using the point of the sentence, right, is why it's telling you this. V'notnin batfu'ah me'afar hamakom, and they place into the produce some of the dust of that particular place. Uma'amid et hatru'ah milir kav, and it prevents the food from rotting. So the actual land, so he's saying the soil itself helps preserve the produce. Near Eli, so it appears to me, this must be the editor, I suppose. I don't, although it could be this is Rashi. Although usually I don't see near Eli in Rashi. Um,
Not in mine.
he usually says something to the effect of, in my humble opinion, he'll use that kind of language. But this seems, so maybe it's simply the editor of this text of Rashi. Near Eli, Shehud Da'at Rabbi Nechemia, that this is the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia, that Ein Sarich Klal Lahagia Barashi, and there was no need at all to put this into the Rashi, to put this little text that we've just read into the Rashi, Ka'asher Allah Vedat Katsatim, which is the opinion according to some students of Rashi, some people who have studied Rashi. So this is, of course, why wouldn't Rashi say this? Why wouldn't it be appropriate for Rashi to say? I'm not certain. I'm not sure. I'm assuming Rabbi Nehemiah is an early rabbi, maybe a rabbi mentioned in the Midrash Rabbah, And certainly Rashi is culling from the Midrash Rabbah and from the Talmud and from other earlier rabbinic sources, putting his commentary together based on his incredible knowledge of all that material, that source material. So I wish I could shed more light on this editorial comment here. I'm not certain. I'll have to allow that to percolate. Vayitzbor Yosef bar, and Joseph gathered grain, collected grain, kachol hayam, harbe ma'od, like the sand of the sea, harbe ma'od, a great amount. Ad ki hadal lispor, until it ceased to be counted, ki ein mispar, because there wasn't a number to account for the amount of grain they had gathered. So there were limitations to the Egyptian way of counting. That, just as letters of the alphabet were one of the greatest discoveries or inventions of the human mind, I would say Arabic numerals were also on a mathematical level an equally amazing discovery. Well, the Egyptian, even the Romans, remember, didn't have that concept of Arabic numerals. So the whole concept of zero, right? That's what makes Arabic numerals so amazing. Let's see if there's anything
I think
here.
zero came from India.
Yeah, could well be, could well be. But the whole idea that this whole system is based on zero, or on the fact that we have a way to express zero. In other words, nothing, Judith, is something. Incredible.
Well, nothing is something.
That's right. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Yosef. Let me see. Nope, we got a Rashi here.
Two
Ad
Russians.
ad ki chadal lispor, until it could no longer be counted. Ad ki chadal lo hasofer. Uh, so he says the reason it's ad ki chadal lo hasofer, that is, the scribe could no longer lispor, count. He could no longer count. V'hazeh hareze mikra katzar. And he says this is an abbreviated scripture. In other words, when it says until it could no longer count, you have to include the sofer. That's understood in this sentence. Until the scribe could no longer account for it. The ein mispar, for there was no number. The fisha ein mispar, there was no number that could express how much was there. V'harei ki, and so that's why it's ad ki. Okay, ki mishamesh b'lashon daha, because the word ki, which normally we translate as because, can also mean in that, Or ki can also be if. Take a look at here.
Chabad said does mean because.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, daha. Right. Ki can mean if, but it also can mean because.
Yeah, it's because there was no number.
Let's go on now. Ula Yosef Yulad Shnei Vanim, and to Joseph were born two sons, Beterem Tavosh Nat Harav, before the years of famine arrived. Asher Yalda lo Osnat, to whom Osnat, Bat Potiphera Kohen On, the daughter of Potiphara, the priest of On, bore him. So I want to tell you, this is, we of course were not able to read that section. We did not cover that section of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. And what's so interesting is that there is a rabbinic tradition that Potiphar's wife, who of course lusted after Joseph, was not in fact, her motives were not in fact all bad by any means. That she had received a prophecy that she would have children through Joseph. And because she'd received that prophecy, she assumed that she was the one who was going to bear those children to Joseph, whereas it really meant her having children through Joseph was that her daughter was going to marry Joseph and provide children for her. And so, what's so interesting is that likewise within the Quran, there's this story related in the Quran, and in the Quran, it is explicit that this was her motivation. In other words, this midrash becomes part of the Quranic literature itself, and I thought that was so interesting when I came across that in my studies. So just that's that's some of the background to that particular incident, which we couldn't actually read this year. Okay. Beterim tavosh natarav. So why does it have to mean? Why does the sentence have to include that those children were born prior to the years of famine? And this is from Ta'anit, from the tractate Ta'anit, on page 11. Mikan. From this statement, we can derive, we can learn out the asur la'adam, that it is forbidden for a person, the shamesh mitato, to engage in sexual activity, bishnei ravon, during years of famine. In other words, when the world is suffering, you don't engage in such things because, in a way, it's like ignoring what's going on around you. But that is, you're learning some halacha here.
How would that be? You know, okay. Sometimes when we say, if you're poor, why are you having children?
Yes.
Um, but it is so common, so normal. How would that be a halacha that you don't? Because everybody does.
Well,
That's why it's halacha.
right.
Doing
Lauren
what
has heard me. Lauren will be able to answer my question. What is the subtext of the written Torah, Lauren?
doing what doesn't come naturally.
Yes. The point is that if it were natural for people to behave in various kinds of ways that the Torah mandates, then you don't have to write it into the Torah. You will find no halacha that says a person should breathe. You will find no halacha that says a person should eat. The fact is that in overcoming our passions, right, in being able to control our impulses, we actually transcend our animality. That is at least a way of looking at things. It's certainly not a modern way of perceiving it, but going very early down into our tradition, there is this sense that we are, as in a sense, we are unformed, and by learning how to use our minds to control our passions, and it means, and it's to control, not, and control doesn't mean to dump on. You know, I sometimes like to use the word dance in connection with this. In other words, that we see this sort of bifurcation of human personality, and that we need to use our minds to be able to dance, have this dance with our feelings. We're not looking to become Vulcans, but on the other hand, uncontrolled feelings are self-destructive.
What I like about the concept is that um, these feelings and urges are absolutely natural to all animals. That would include us, but the ability to be conscious of their existence and then to consciously choose to engage or not engage of them is very powerful. Other than just being a slave to urges, you have the choice of not being a slave to urges, and then further that your servitude is supposed to be towards God and not towards natural urges.
And that's why your servitude towards God is actually liberating. That when you become a servant of God, you become liberated from being enslaved to yourself. There is a wonderful little midrash that's used in the book, in the movie The Chosen, if you remember the movie The Chosen, where the rabbi's son is expounding on the fact that he says, you know, if you look at the word heart, which refers to emotions, it starts with the letter lamed, lave, right? One's heart, lave, right? On the other hand, if you look at the word for mind, right, for your reason, that is starts with a mem, right? A mem. Moach starts with a mem. And he says, if you put your heart in front of your mind, you are going to be a lemech, a fool, a clown. But if you put your mind in front of your heart, you
Melech.
become a melech, king. And in some ways, which is this cute little, you know, drash, whatever, is reflected, I think, in the Sfirot, because the Sfirot in some ways also represent the perfection of the human spirit and the human personality, starting off with the rational Sfirot that are the three at the top, and then the seven emotional Sfirot, or six emotional Sfirot, and the bottom Sfirah is Malchut, sovereignty, and to be able to express sovereignty over yourself. You're the one, right? So
And,
yeah.
and like you said a little while ago, um, you know, you may not reach that level, but the process of trying is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The journey.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And again, I think this is reflected in Buddhism. You know, one of the most important lessons that I ever learned from Buddhism, and I'm not certainly by no means, you know, a scholar of Buddhism, but the thing that was the discovery of what I understand to be the concept of detachment. And if I were to express the concept of detachment in simple terms, there are the phenomena. There's what's going on. There are the facts. There's the situation. And there's also then how I feel about the situation. And those are two separate things. And we tend to blend the two. In other words, we blend what we feel about the situation into the situation. We can't control the situation. Sometimes we have some measure of control of it, but we may not be able to control the situation at all because it involves other people, other causal things, you know, that we can't control. But how we feel about the situation, that is something we can control. We can learn to control it. We can do a better job of it. And there are degrees. There's a spectrum of how much you choose to control your feelings. People can say things to you that are hurtful. How you choose to react is up to you. You can let it go. You can absorb it or find other ways to palliate the feelings that are inside of you, but you don't have to react.
And also in Buddhism,
Yes.
it's that there is the reality,
Yes.
there is what you feel, and
Mhm.
then there is what is known as detachment. But it
Yes.
doesn't mean that you make the choice to do anything. What you do is you let it all go. And then what you bring into your life is about the detachment of just seeing it all and just letting it flow through you as a river.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's nothing to do with control.
Yeah. Well, there is the control in not reacting. That's the
Would you stop it? No, you can just stop it right there. There is no control in Buddhism. We're talking about Buddhism. It's not about control in not reacting. It's not about control. It's about the river that flows with all of the information, the heart and the mind, and it flows through you. You do not attach to anything. And then, okay, I'm going to take it a step further, which is just coming to me. That's where your receptivity of God comes in, is when you let go of all of that.
okay. And I guess maybe it's just a question of how that's expressed, because I feel that it takes discipline to learn how to do that. And yes, that is you're describing
Oh,
the
yeah, discipline.
what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, discipline is exactly that. Discipline is deciding, it does involve self-control. It does involve, discipline involves controlling yourself. You have to make a decision to do these things. You know, I mean, you have to ultimately make a decision that you want to be open to some things. So there's sort of there's a very murky distinction perhaps between feeling and thought here. But regardless, you know, whether or not one chooses to accept these things or to buy into these things, I believe in some ways it comes from a part of you that is actually meta conscious.
If you
Yeah.
if you want to put it on a level of you make the decision to commit yourself to sitting on your zafu or to
Hmm.
come to study,
Hmm.
if you want to put it on that level of that's control, well, fine, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's all. It was just simply a matter of, you know, finding the right language to describe what was going on. But I don't, you know, I loved what you did in expressing, you know, how it operates as a river and sort of trying, you know, finding that language to describe it. But I was sort of in a sense talking about something else in that process, whereas you were telling us about where it needs to wind up. I think if I don't want to misquote you or
No, you're
misunderstand.
yeah, you're misquoting me. It's
Okay.
just you sit,
Mm-hmm.
the reality is there, your thoughts are there, and it just melts away all into one because it's all one.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there with nothingness, which is something, as
Mm-hmm.
we just learned.
Right. Right.
and and really with the source of all.
And it's after 10.
Yes, it is. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to try and mark the place. I'm going to see if I can do that. In case we
You
ever get,
haven't grabbed it.
oops, I know.
It turns into a little icon of a marker when it's still not grabbed.
For some reason that isn't doing it.
Try
And
the
this,
next one, yeah.
I know, but this one is really thick.
Yeah,
So
just make a little, you can do it. That's all right.
that's it.
It's real visible, so that's good.
Okay. So I'm
Yeah,
going
you
to
definitely see that.
You
stop.
spilled some ink on the page.
And I need to stop the recording and wish people Shabbat Shalom. And hope we'll see you when we start next week's Parsha of Vayigash. A lot is going to happen in between. If you have a chance to just read the Parsha in the English, that's still helpful to give us to the next stage. So,
Well, have a good